Maybe somebody coming.
Hi, and welcome to a new episode of Cinemania. And today I have a very special guest, someone who I count as a personal friend of mine. I hope he counts me as so as well, and somebody who usually doesn't really need an introduction, but I'm gonna let him introduce himself. David, take it away.
Thank you, Linda. Lovely to be here. Hello, everybody. My name is David Quantick. I'm a comedy writer and a screenwriter and a TV writer and other stuff.
Mm, yeah. David, we mostly know you as a music writer from early days of the NME, but you've moved on to doing comedy, to writing for, you won an Emmy for to writing for sort of TV and film. But I also know that you are a massive, huge cinema fan, a huge film, even if you're a bit more critical of it than I am. And this has been mainly a film podcast, but I also want to talk to you about your early days in music journalism. How did you start music journalism?
Gosh, well, it's a long story. It's not really. I was reading the NME and it annoyed me. There was an article about an artist called Bob Seger, who I quite like now. And I wrote to the editor and slagged off his magazine at great length and said, Bob Seger is not enough in capital letters. And he wrote back and invited me in. And I started reviewing records. And then it all went from there. So, yeah.
How does one segue from writing about music? Actually, admittedly, in a really funny way as well, because I remember reading you in the NME and all your stuff always used to make me laugh. How do you segue from writing about music to going into television and radio and writing comedy?
Well, I always liked comedy. Before I was into music, I liked comedy records, and I was just a big fan of things like the Goons and the Goodies and so forth. Comedy films like Blazing Saddles, which really blew me away when I saw that at the cinema. And I always tried to put comedy in. The NME in those days wasn't just a music paper, it wrote about film and books and everything. And it was a lot to fill every week. So I would write reviews in the style of scripts. I would try and interview comedians. And I used that as a way to get work, to be honest. But no, I was always trying to write comedy as well. And then I sent some stuff to Spit and Image and they bought it. So I started being a comedy writer as well, about 4 years after I started being a music writer.
Let's start with, I usually ask my guests about 4 or 5 core questions, but in between them we can talk about anything. My first question usually is, what is your earliest memory, your earliest film memory, and something that you went to either in the cinema or at home on TV and you thought, wow, I love this, either director or film or genre?
Well, the first emotional moment at the cinema, I think, was seeing The Sound of Music. Oh God, because in the 60s or the mid 60s when I was a kid, there was an awful lot of stuff going round and round again. It was the equivalent of streaming.
Mm.
So I saw Doctor Who and the Daleks at the cinema, which I didn't really think much of because it wasn't Doctor Who and Bernard Cribbins was in it. Oh, the irony. And so I saw Bambi and like millions of people cried. Spoilers, when his mum dies. But I remember seeing The Sound of Music, and for some reason, the song I Am 16 Going on 17, just when I was 6, did my head in, and I just cried. I have no idea why. Maybe it was the futility of life expressed in the lyrics, but no. So, yeah, those were three influences: bored by science fiction, horrified by death in a comedy, and horrified by death in a musical.
Were you brought up in quite a filmy family? Would you say? Were your immediate family interested in cinema at all when you were growing up?
No more than most people. I mean, we hardly ever went. Um, we only really went in school holidays. So I saw Disney films. As soon as I was old enough, we started going to James Bond films. But I remember it was just old stuff because I remember seeing things like Fantasia and Sinbad and stuff like that. And we'd go and see the new Disney. So we'd go and see the Jungle Book, or we'd go and see the new. It was just me and my sister a lot of the time. My parents weren't that bothered.
Hmm. You mentioned Bond there. I'm going to ask you the ultimate question. Who's your favorite Bond?
Um, I think it's Sean Connery because it's just a generational thing, you know, it's the one you grow up with. Sean Connery embodies every characteristic of James Bond because he was there first and everything else is copied off that Bond, no matter who it is, you know,
Mm,
no matter which actor is playing him, he is doing movie James Bond, which
mm,
is different in a way. I'll mention Doctor Who again because nobody now is doing William Hartnell's Doctor Who. You know, Ncuti Gatwa's not doing William Hartnell. None of them, the modern ones are, but everyone's doing Sean Connery. And because James Bond is a suit, he's not a character. James Bond is a tuxedo and a gun with a silencer,
yeah.
and he's still having naughty sex and drinking the wrong drinks.
Mm.
So yeah, Sean Connery is the template.
So we can't really have a woke Bond, as it were, can we? I mean, it would defeat the whole image of a Bond. Or do you
Yeah,
think
I
we
mean
already had one?
you can do a different character. You know, you can retire Bond if you like, and you can have. And I think that would be. There've been various attempts to do a different Bond. There were the Harry Palmer movies. Now we got Slow Horses doing that trail again. There's loads of different ways, but it's the character. It'd be like making one of my favorite things is when they keep trying to make Judge Dredd movies. And the first one with Sylvester Stallone was ridiculous. It was a cartoon. And then they did the one with Carl What's His Face, Carl Urban, and
Mm.
it's fantastic because they say, right, this is Judge Dredd. He has no personality beyond relentlessly tracking people down and arresting them. You know, he's a psychopath with no feelings, and that's it. If you make Judge Dredd, the actor has to be that character. And it's the same with the Bond films. Yeah, I kind of hope they keep making him like that because even at the time, he wasn't nice. Even in 1962, people were going, I say, I must take my kids to see James Bond and teach them all about being a gentleman. Just wasn't true.
What about Doctor Who? I mean, there's talk of it going out at midnight, the new season. And that's for me, I've always seen Doctor Who as a children's program. And it's suddenly, I feel like it's suddenly been diverted from that. Do you agree or not?
Well, I think the reason it's going out in midnight is basically because it's now a Disney co-production, which means that they have to make certain concessions to America. Because, you know, Russell T Davies, the showrunner, has said that he wants it to be massive and he wants it to be a brand that can compete with Star Wars.
Mm,
And that means it has to be shown in America. And that means that America gets it first. And it's not ideal. You know, I'm going to watch it with my kids when it's on British TV, and I'm going to avoid social media because there's going to be 9 billion Americans going, why does he live in a box?
mm.
And why isn't it rubbish like Star Wars? So, you know, that'll be something to contend with.
Let's get on to the Star Wars. You've got a bee in your bonnet about Star Wars, so let's talk about that bit. I think it's jokingly you have that, and I know as long as I've known you, you've always sort of made fun of people who are too enthusiastic about Star Wars. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Star Wars, I'll be honest, they are the first two and a half or whatever it is are brilliant films. You know, real classics of cinema, real genre changes, whatever, brought science fiction into the mainstream, which I'm very grateful about. They were fun, they were daft. Um, they're children's films as well, by the way. They contain no mature emotions. It's hilarious how the one sexual relationship in it, in any of the movies before recently, was suddenly changed into a brother-sister one, which is like, wow, just bizarre. But yeah, absolute classics of cinema. But it then started to strangle the culture. And it's just horrible, you know, when you go out and it's like you go to Tesco's and there's a Stormtrooper t-shirt and every joke is about Darth Vader. It's just relentlessly dull. You know, people say the Star Wars is a religion, and it is, but it's one of those really boring religions like the Church of Neasden. And it's just they get worse. People just, oh, they're milking a dead cow, and nobody wants to drink the dead cow's milk.
I think, like me, you're a massive fan of sci-fi, but really clever sci-fi. Are you also a fan of sci-fi literature at all? And what are your favorite sort of authors around that realm?
Yeah, I love science fiction ever since I was a kid. Um, I used to read it in comics. I started off reading John Wyndham, who invented, you know, the disaster. He'd invented the apocalypse story. And when you realize that you peopled it with everyday characters, and people laugh a bit now because they all smoke pipes and say things like, I say, Judy, but he was amazing. In recent years, Christopher Priest, whose stuff is almost unfilmable. Ian Banks, I loved. I absolutely love science fiction and science fiction movies. I think what's annoying is that this division, again, I blame Star Wars, between the kind of space opera where it's all busty ladies still and space rockets, or the kind of weird stuff. And when you go on Amazon now with the streaming services, not Amazon, sorry, Netflix, it
Okay.
actually, the stuff I like, I find is in a section called highbrow science fiction, which is
Mm.
like films like Arrival, which are brilliant. But that's highbrow now. And it's like, I just want to get a busty space woman and shoot all those people in the head.
Oh, so you're not really into like the more sort of manicured, really like brainy stuff, like say, I don't know, like Battlestar Galactica and things like that. Were you not a fan of that at all?
But I liked it on the telly. I like clever reboots. I like it when they
Yeah, the
take
reboot.
something and just take the humor out of it, like Batman, and go, what if it was real? And it's like, oh, here we go. But that was a good show, because again, like they say, all science fiction is actually about the present. And that was about the post 9/11 world of who's a terrorist and who's a freedom fighter,
Mm.
imperialism and stuff like that. That was fun. It was what Star Wars about. It's about the fact that somebody was 13 when they saw Buck Rogers.
Mm.
That's not a thing to base a life on.
Mm. Let's segue back into your own career. I want to talk to you about your stuff that you've done with Armando Iannucci and the rest of the sort of, all the comedy stuff that made it really well, like really big in America. How did you get into that? And had you known that team before for years before that?
Yeah, that was really weird. I used to do a comedy column in the NME, as we talked about, called Culture Vulture, and it was just end of the 80s. It was just mocking popular culture and pop music. And I wrote it with a guy called Stephen Wells, Seething Wells, who's a brilliant, sadly no longer with us, a brilliant, brilliant,
Mm.
anarchic, quite frightening sometimes writer. And Armando read our column. And I always say, I think he thought that we were like teenage punks and was a bit upset when we turned up and we were in our early 30s. But me and Stephen worked on the Hour, and then I we worked on the Day to Day. And then after that, I started working with Jane Bussman, and I worked with Jane on Brass Eye and Jam, and then Saturday Night Armistice. And then that was sort of kept in touch with Armando. And then, yeah, the short answer is that when they did the series of The Thick of It, as opposed to the individual episodes, he was after more writers. So I started writing on that, and they were about to make Veep, and that was just astonishing. To be working with someone like Armando after 30 odd years and to be working on something like Veep. And then Avenue 5, which sadly only got two series, but was pretty amazing. So yeah, that's a connection that's lasted.
How does the writing happen on those kind of shows? Do you all get together? Is there like some kind of writing room, or do you do it individually at home and then send it off to the group to sort of decide whether they want it or not? How does that work?
It works in all different ways, but mostly it's a pyramid that Armando thinks of the show, and then the people he works most closely with, whether it's Sean Gray or Simon Blackwood, sort of broadens it out from there, and then they plan it. And then by the time they've planned it out and got a spine, other writers come in and literally write the episodes and the dialogue and stuff. And then it radiates outward from that. And there are writers like me on Avenue 5 who are just changing dialogue, who are just making it funnier. So it's a unique system. But yes, there are people in a room writing, but they're not me. So for all I know, they're playing cards
Yeah.
or
You
making dogs
famously
fight.
won an Emmy, a group Emmy, or an individual. Was it an individual Emmy that you won, or was it a group one?
I've got my name on it,
Yeah.
so I don't really
Oh,
know, but it was
yeah.
in the States, as I'm sure you know, they nominate individual episodes of a
Oh,
show.
yes, of course. Yeah, yeah,
I think this was the, I have no idea. Let's have a look.
yeah.
It says Outstanding Comedy Series V. David Quantick, supervising producer. Yeah,
Oh,
so I worked on that series. So we all got, it was great because you go in backstage and it's like a hardware store. There's just a big MDF shelf with metal brackets and it's got thousands of Emmys on, and Veep, I think Veep won 20
Wow.
that year.
Yeah.
Because of course,
How does it feel? How did it feel for you to like to be amongst all these people who you admire from afar, I guess, or don't admire so much? How does it feel to suddenly find yourself in Hollywood accepting this award? Is
sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. No worries. Shall I
Okay, so
repeat the
yes.
question?
No, what
Yeah.
was it like being in
Yeah.
among
Yeah.
all these? Well, it was a bit annoying, really, because the only people I saw were Ricky Gervais and James Corden, and I can get that at home. No, I mean, it was extraordinary because I think that, well, the most extraordinary thing, which I have talked about, is that me and some of the writers were at the back, and I was there with my wife, Jenna, and they announced it, and it was like, oh, we won. And I remember running with another writer called Roger, and we were just running. And it was like being at the back of a stadium. We just never seemed to get nearer.
Mm.
And we finally got on the stage just as Armando finished. Oh, whatever happened? And then I'm stood there getting my breath. And then Mel Brooks appears from nowhere
Yeah.
and shakes my hand and says, well done. And I
Wow.
said, thank you, sir. And it was just, I mean, I can't really describe it because it was sort of more than winning an award. It was my Hollywood moment, and it was
Mm.
extraordinary. And then we went to this mad party where they put labels on our Emmys, and is it either Andre Rieu or the other one with a
Mm.
name like that, sang. And yeah, it was just really weird, but it
Mm.
was great.
Yeah. You mentioned Mel Brooks there. Now, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is that who are your sort of ultimate comedy inspirations, like of the older sort of generation when you're growing up? Who did you like look up to and sort of admire and that really matched the way you saw things in life?
Well, I got given a book of Goon Show scripts, the British radio show, and that was sort of the moment because telly, it was sort of there was general light entertainment when I was a kid, and it was pretty boring. It was like, and now a singer, and now some crappy jokes, and now a monkey in a hat, and it was really dull. And I sort of realized as time went on that there were certain kinds of comedy that was surreal, but like Spike Milligan, like the Goodies, like Bugs Bunny, like kind of the Marx Brothers, who I wasn't really a fan of. But there's a movie called Hell's a Poppin', which if you haven't seen, you have to see. It's like a Bugs Bunny cartoon, but with people. And then you see Mel Brooks and you see Blazing Saddles, and it's the same kind of humor. And then you see the Airplane movies, and it's the same humor. And also, these are kind of underrated. The early scary movies, the parodies,
Mm.
they are in that Airplane tradition. They were started by the Zucker brothers, and then they were taken over by the Wayans brothers.
Mm.
And I realized that sense of humor, which is kind of what they used to call screwy or zany, that surreal kind of humor full of references and breaking the fourth wall is
Mm.
absolutely what I love.
Yeah. Do you think I know so many people who are into that, and they mostly tend to be male, really. I always my other half is also a fan of those movies, and he could watch them like 10 times and get like pleasure out of them every time. I kind of get not bored. I get it. I kind of get it. I don't really want to watch something like that more than once. Do you have to have a certain way of looking at life to enjoy those things repeatedly, do you think? Because I don't get it at all.
Yeah, I mean, we're all different. I'm not going to say that men are different to women because I love screwball comedies and I love old rom-coms. And the great thing about those movies is I think that's kind of the answer because those movies are both silly in
Mm.
that people say silly things and do weird things and act in a surreal manner. And all those most comedy is saying to the world is mad. There's no point to anything. And if we're in on the joke, we are. Whereas romantic films, and my wife loves K-dramas and she likes romance, and I do too, but they say that, there's hope for humanity, men and women or men and men or whatever will get together, that, and that there is a dance of relationships, and relationships are kind of the real world. Men don't allegedly watch films about relationships. And I think something about rom-coms combines the two, brings men and women together. But that I don't know. I think a really good screwball comedy or rom-com like The Shop Around the Corner
Oh yeah.
or Bringing Up Baby, any Cary Grant film. If you don't like Cary Grant films, then there's something wrong with you because
Mm.
they talk about the war between men and women that's resolved by love, and they talk about the fact the world is insane.
Yeah. Do you like any of the? I am being myself a huge rom-com fan. What do you think of this sort of latest ones, like the more modern ones? I'm not talking 90s Tom Hanks and the more like more recent ones. I don't know. Like I see, it's so thin on the ground. I can't. Nothing springs to mind. What do you think of the more recent ones?
Well, it depends. I mean, there are so many different kinds. I mean, I quite like watching straight romantic ones. There was one with Brooke Shields and Carrie Elwes the other day, and it was silly. He was a moody man who owned a Scots castle, and she was an American woman looking for love, and they ended up together. And oh, it was a great cast. But then you've got things like there's the kind of tight now. There's a film called Anyone But You with
Oh,
Sydney What's Her Face.
I liked it.
I liked it, but it's interesting because it's not witty.
No.
It's warm, what they used to call a warmedy. And I
Yeah.
always prefer a bit of spikiness
Mhm.
because, whichever Shakespeare play it is with Benedict and Beatrice is the
Mm.
template for rom-coms, which is basically two people who hate each other's guts. TV has a word for it, K-dramas have a word for it. Enemies become friends.
Mm.
It's a genre, and I love all that. But there's a film worth checking out. I think it's on Netflix. It's called I Want You Back. And the premise is just really daft. It's a man who's dumped by his girlfriend and a woman who's dumped by a boyfriend try and get those two back together again. Sorry, they try and destroy those new relationships, and of course they fall in love. And it's a daft film, but there's a section in it where the female character, for reasons that I won't go into, has to learn Suddenly Seymour from Little Shop of Horrors, and it's incredibly moving. Um, yeah, so slightly off the wall rom-coms I like.
I
I had
mean,
a lot of time for the Richard, sorry,
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
because I had a lot of time for a lot of the Richard Curtis ones,
Mm.
particularly the one everybody hates, Love Actually. There was some
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
weird stuff in that. Yeah, it's amazing what people don't like. Was that the one with the Prime Minister in?
That's
The
Love
Grant?
Actually, isn't it?
There's a scene in there
Yeah.
where Billy Bob Thornton plays the American president, and he's got the hots for Martine McCutcheon, and he basically is telling Hugh Grant that he is going to have sex with Martine McCutcheon, and it's weird and it's brilliant.
I absolutely love Love Actually, and I every year I hear the slander on Twitter or wherever social media on Love Actually. I have to always call it out because I know it's not perfect, and people accuse it of being all sorts of things and sexist, not of its time and stuff. But it is very much of its time, in my opinion. As silly as it is, it's a classic rom-com with like several sort of characters. I really really love that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Another question. Sorry, another one of my core questions I usually ask is, who is your favorite either filmmaker, actor, or actress, and what was the best thing you saw them in?
Oh God, almost impossible to say.
Really? Okay.
I mean, in old films, Cary Grant put on the telly, and any Cary Grant film is almost brilliant. In, I have no idea. I mean, Ryan Reynolds stuff it. Yeah, I will say again, rom-coms, the comedy films that Ryan Reynolds made from after Van Wilder up until recently, he was kind of fulfilling that Chevy Chase role for a while. He's in that Cary Grant kind of gentleman anarchist tradition. It's interesting. There's a kind of, yeah, not like Bill Murray, who's a kind of rough anarchist, or John
Yeah.
Belushi, who was kind of a mental. Um, but Ryan Reynolds, Cary Grant, Hugh Laurie, the kind of sophisticated anarchist. But Ryan Reynolds, I think, it's the last thing I saw that he was great in was Free Guy. Is that the
Oh,
name?
love that movie. Fabulous
Yeah,
movie.
completely daft. Kind of a rom-com with Jodie Comer, I believe her
Mm.
name is.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
really, really sweet film. He's Oh, I can't remember it. There's a film where he becomes a pop star, and when he's a teenager, he's really porky, and he loses weight and becomes. He's great.
Yeah,
Give it
it's
up for
also
Ryan Reynolds.
The Proposal with Sandra Bullock, if you remember, where
Oh
they,
yeah,
yeah, where she's Canadian and she needs a green card and they have to get married. I just absolutely love that. It's like a reverse, sort of a gender reverse comedy. I love all those gender
I
reverse
haven't seen that.
comedies.
That's good. I'll watch that.
Oh,
Thank you.
such a great movie. Another one of my questions that I ask everyone: what was your very first movie crush?
Oh God. Might have been Claire Grogan in Gregory's Girl, but I'm sure it must have been somebody before that. Gosh, I can't remember. It wasn't Julie Andrews, I know that. But she seemed to be in everything I watched when I was a kid.
Mm, okay.
No, he's gone.
Go on. That's enough. And who is your current favorite actress or actor of the?
Um, Gosh, I don't really have favorite actors and actresses really. So I'm
Hmm.
not being very helpful in this part of the
Oh, no, no,
conversation,
no.
am
It's
I?
fine. It's fine. It's, if you can't think of them, don't worry about it. Um, well, I want to talk to you about I know you hated La La Land, and I know you know that I love La La Land. Um,
Yes.
what was I've loved all his movies, but basically up to Babylon. Did you watch the Damien Chazelle's Babylon? And
Yeah.
did that confirm to you why you hated La La Land?
Well, I didn't really connect the two. And no, I don't like either of those films, but I preferred Babylon.
Oh, you
Um,
prefer Babylon? Wow.
I
Okay.
don't like it, but I preferred it to La La Land.
Okay.
I mean, La La Land, honestly, my only problem was I thought the songs were rubbish, and that applies to almost every modern musical. Um, I don't like Matilda, for example, because the songs are rubbish, in my opinion. And it just, yeah, and I probably because I hadn't watched the French director, everyone said it was a tribute to, and I also didn't care about the characters. They just, I don't know, maybe they just sang too much, but I didn't care about their relationship, and I didn't care if they stayed together or didn't stay together or however it ends. In Babylon, I just thought it was all set pieces. It would
Hmm.
just be, right, here we are, we're making a film. Oh, and we've stopped now. And I swear, by the way, oh, I can't remember her bloody name, Barbie woman. What's
Margot Robbie.
Margot Robbie. I love Margot Robbie, but I swear, if I see another flipping film where she takes half her clothes off while dancing to a gramophone, I will go mad. She did it in Amsterdam. She does it in Babylon. Don't think she does it in Barbie. Don't think she does it in Suicide Squad. But it's like her thing seems to be, can I have a scene where I take some of my clothes off while dancing to an old gramophone record? It's weird.
Yeah. Dave, now you've got young children. I'm assuming that you do take them very often to the cinema to watch all sorts of extremely boring, but also quite exciting children's movies. Have there been any good kids' movies that you've really enjoyed over the
Oh
last
yeah.
10 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, there's the usual, there's kind of with kids' films, it's kind of a mulch. It's kind of either it's a Pixar movie, so it's a certain standard with the same story every time, or it's not Pixar, so it's very often means a Russian animation with really badly translated dialogue about a hare and a crow who become good friends. But the film that we all love, I mean, all of us, is Mitchell's versus the Machines,
Oh, brilliant.
which is just, isn't it great? It's
Brilliant.
fantastic. And honestly, I went and saw. I enjoyed the first Spider. We enjoyed the first Spider-Man film made by the same people. Hated the second one because it just went on forever and just seemed to be introducing characters all the time. Although it's a middle film, but Mitchell's versus the Machines. It's funny, it's emotional, it's a little bit subversive because in every scene there are little rainbow stickers and stuff like that, so you know how she's going to end up in a good way. It's really funny, it's really smart, and it's a new kind of animation. Their house style of going back to drawn looking animation is beautiful. So yeah, if somebody suddenly finds himself with a child, Mitchell's versus the Machines is so good.
I think it's on Netflix, is it
I
not?
think it is on Netflix
Yeah.
and yeah, easily accessible.
Yeah. And my final question, and I know you've got